I built a $1.6M home with my bare hands, then my family tried to steal it with a lawsuit and a locksmith. Hi, I'm Carter, 33, and 3 years ago I inherited a decaying house no one wanted. I poured my soul into rebuilding it, and now my own family is suing me for being too successful. The appraisal notification hit my inbox at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I saw the number, blinked, and looked again. $1.4 million. I was standing barefoot in the center of the living room I rebuilt from the studs out. The faint scent of white oak flooring and cured epoxy still hung in the air. The light from the massive windows I'd framed myself cut across the room in golden angles. I exhaled slowly, a silent moment of victory. I had taken a rotting, mold-choked Victorian corpse and turned it into something stunning. By Friday, that moment was dead. I walked into the kitchen to find my mother, Brenda, and my sister, Chloe, sitting casually at my custom quartz island. My dad, Frank, was pacing the living room, arms crossed, squinting at the trim like he was inspecting for termites. They had let themselves in, using the smart lock code I'd given them months ago. For emergencies. Stupid. I could already feel the setup. We need to talk, Carter, Dad said without looking at me. The estate, Mom added, as if that explained anything. The estate was settled 3 years ago, I said, setting my keys down. The clink echoed like a warning shot. What are you doing in my house? It's about fairness, Mom said in her best trembling voice, the one she used whenever she wanted to bulldoze boundaries but pretend she was the victim. We saw the Zillow estimate. Chloe helped herself to a bottle of my sparkling water, kicked her heel up like she was in a spa. It's not fair that you're sitting on $1 million asset while I'm struggling to pay rent. I stared at her, wondering if she genuinely believed what she was saying. She was 30, 3 years younger than me. When Grandpa died, he left 2 things: this house, condemned at the time and appraised at $180,000, and a $250,000 life insurance payout. Chloe had taken the money. Tax-free. And she had laughed when the will was read. Have fun with the haunted mansion, Carter, she joked. She wasn't laughing now. You bought a BMW, I said. You went to Europe. You rented a penthouse. That was your choice. I was young, Chloe snapped. I didn't know better. You tricked me. You knew the market would turn. You played me. I laughed. Actually laughed. You didn't want to touch a hammer. You wanted cash. That's not a trick. That's a preference. It doesn't matter, Dad said, stepping in. We've discussed it as a family. The will was supposed to make things equal. You need to cash out, refinance. Take out a loan, give your sister $600,000. That's fair. I looked around the room I built, every beam, every nail, every hidden bracket I sweated over in the dead of winter. Get out, I said. Excuse me? Mom gasped. Out. Of. My. House. Dad bristled. We're your family. We're correcting a mistake. Don't you dare talk to us like that. I lived in the basement with a space heater while the roof leaked snow into the upstairs. I cut in. I showered at a gym for half a year. I sold my truck to underpin the foundation. I miss birthdays, holidays, everything. Now that it's beautiful, you want a slice? Mom's eyes welled up. We're family. The strong help the weak. Chloe is drowning in debt. Not my problem. Carter, Dad started. Leave. Or I call the police. He glared, finger in my face. This isn't over. You're being selfish. Greed changes people. I slammed the door behind them and changed the code that same night. That was the day I learned blood doesn't run thicker than profit. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, hunched in a chair by the front window like a soldier in a trench, listening to the house creak and settle around me. Every pop of a floorboard sounded like betrayal. My mind wouldn't shut up, kept replaying every moment of the last 3 years. Every insult. Every warning I ignored. Every screw I turned by hand because I couldn't afford a cordless drill that year. The first winter in that house had nearly broken me. There was black mold behind the plaster, and a family of raccoons squatting in the attic. The kitchen floor sagged 3 inches in the middle. The gas lines were a death wish. I wore gloves to bed. I pissed in a bucket for 2 weeks when the plumbing failed. And where was Chloe? In Ibiza, drinking something pink out of a fishbowl. Where were my parents? Laughing about how I was throwing good money after bad. Cut your losses, Carter. Sell to a developer. Walk away. But I didn't. Because I saw what it could become. And now that I'd made it real, now that the local design magazine ran a spread calling it a historic revival with modern soul, they wanted in. 3 days later, it escalated. A letter arrived in the mail. Cheap envelope, crooked logo from a second-rate law office in Beaverton. A demand for constructive trust. I'd barely finished reading it before my stomach flipped. They were accusing me of fraud. Not just of being unfair. No, they were saying I manipulated the original appraisal, conspired to devalue the estate, and defrauded my own grandfather to steal the house. It was pure fiction, but it was dangerous fiction. If a judge even half bought their story, they could slap a lease pendens on the property. That meant I couldn't refinance, couldn't sell, couldn't do a damn thing until the case played out. Which could take years. I didn't call them. I didn't yell. I did what I always do when blueprints don't line up. I got a second opinion. I called Marcus Thorne. Now, Marcus was a different breed. A real estate litigator known for 3 things in Portland: leather shoes that cost more than rent, a voice like gravel over bourbon, and a reputation for court brutality. If legal battles were boxing matches, Marcus only fought knockout rounds. His office looked like a Victorian murder mystery. Dark walnut shelves, brass lamps, one dead plant in the corner like a warning. I laid it all out: the will, the probate closure, the appraisal, and a binder so thick with Home Depot receipts it looked like a phone book. Marcus flipped through the demand letter, snorted once, then looked at me over his glasses. "This is garbage," he said. "It's not a case. It's a shakedown." I exhaled. "But," he held up a finger, "judges are people. If they find a sympathetic angle, spoiled sister, greedy brother, they might not throw it out. Especially if you've got any text or email where you say something dumb like, 'Don't worry, I'll take care of you.' You got anything like that?" "Not a word," I said. The appraisal was done by an outside firm. Independent. My father signed off. He was executor. Marcus paused. "Your dad signed the valuation, and now he's claiming you rigged it?" "Exactly." Marcus smiled slowly. "Well, that's useful." He leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his head. "Carter, you've got 2 options. Pay them a nuisance settlement, 50 grand, maybe 100, and walk away clean. Or, scorch the earth." I didn't even hesitate. "Burn it," I said. We didn't wait. Marcus filed a motion for declaratory judgment the same week, demanding the court officially affirm that the house belonged to me alone. No implied trust, no family equity, no backsies. It was aggressive, strategic, and designed to force their hand. Then we sent our letter. Marcus drafted it like a sniper assembles a rifle, clean, cold, and lethal. We reminded their cheap lawyer that if they wanted to claim the original appraisal was fraudulent, then Frank Carter, the executor of the estate, would be confessing to fiduciary fraud. That's not just civil. That's criminal. We even bolded that part in the letter. It was a legal gun to my father's temple. And then we waited. 2 weeks of dead silence. I spent the time outside, digging in the backyard like a man with nowhere else to put his rage. I planted Japanese maples along the fence line, cleaned up the tool shed, re-oiled the cedar siding. I had no appetite. I stopped listening to music. Every sound felt like an intrusion, every text notification like a landmine. Then, the emotional airstrike started. First, a call from my Aunt Linda. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. "Your mother's heart is breaking," she said, like I was responsible for some kind of homicide. "She cries every night, Carter. Is this really the man you've become?" Then the cousins chimed in. Vague Facebook posts about money-changing people and greedy family members who forget where they came from. I was officially uninvited from Thanksgiving. Not that I had planned on going. But it was the speed of it that stunned me, how fast they all aligned against me like I was the villain in a Netflix family drama. Then came the ambush. I got home one evening, work bag still over my shoulder, and saw a locksmith van in my driveway. A guy in a polo shirt was kneeling at my front door, drilling into my brand new smart lock. Behind him stood Frank Carter, my father, arms crossed, jaw tight. I parked my truck behind the van, boxing it in, and got out slow. My heart rate didn't even spike. It just froze. Like my whole body went into threat assessment mode. "What are you doing?" I asked, walking up the driveway. The locksmith looked up, startled. Owner lost his key. Just replacing the cylinder." I pulled my wallet out. "I'm the owner. Here's the deed." Here's my ID. The guy looked at Dad, then back at me. I'm not getting involved in this, he mumbled, already backing up. You're not going anywhere, I said, stepping in front of him. You drilled my lock. That's property damage. I took out my phone, snapped a photo of the locksmith's license plate, then turned to my dad. This is burglary, I said. I have a right to inspect the property, he barked. We're filing an injunction. This house is part of the family legacy. The legacy, I said, stepping forward, was a moldy pile of wood with a raccoon infestation. I built this. You want the equity, not the bricks. I called the cops. Didn't hesitate for a second. Officer Miller showed up, someone I actually went to high school with. That was the worst part. Watching him try to be neutral as I explained why my father was drilling my front door like a crackhead trying to steal a flat screen. Frank, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, you can't just drill the locks on your son's house. This is a civil matter. Dad growled. Attempted breaking and entering, I said. Trespassing. I want a report. Miller sighed and wrote it up. Then he looked at me like he wanted to say something, but didn't. That night, I sat in the empty living room again, lights off, house quiet as a tomb. Only this time, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a target. I couldn't stay. It hit me like a slap the next morning as I stared at the dented drill marks around my smart lock. The house felt poisoned. Not by ghosts or mold, but by betrayal. Every corner, every beam I hand sanded, every wire I ran through the studs, it all felt like it had been touched by something rotten. If I stayed, I'd never relax. I'd always be waiting for the next attack. The next locksmith. The next fake emergency. Chloe peeking in my windows. Dad parked across the street. Mom showing up with tears and Tupperware trying to manipulate her way inside. I called Marcus. How fast can we sell? I asked. With the threat of a lease pendens? He asked. Risky. But if we push hard on their fraud theory, we might be able to flip it back on them. Let me work. And holy hell, did he work? He deposed my father. Sat him down in a conference room, lights blazing, tape recorder running, and asked, on the record, whether he stood by the original estate appraisal. Frank hemmed. He hawed. He tried to talk around it. Then Marcus leaned in and said, You do realize perjury is a Class C felony in this state, right? Frank folded. He admitted that the appraisal was fair. That it was independent. That he signed off on it. That I had no legal or verbal obligation to hold the house in trust for Chloe or anyone else. That recording was our silver bullet. Marcus filed it immediately with the court, along with a motion to dismiss their entire constructive trust claim as malicious and baseless. The next day, their lawyer dropped the threat. Gone. Vanished like a bad dream. I listed the house within 72 hours. It went on the market at $1.5 million and triggered a bidding war. I had 14 showings in 48 hours and 4 serious offers. The one I took came from a 38-year-old tech executive from San Jose who didn't blink at the price. He just liked the radiant floor heating and the view of the city skyline from the upstairs balcony. He didn't care about the lawsuit, the family, or the emotional wreckage. He just saw a beautiful home. And he paid $1.65 million. All cash. The closing window was 30 days. And during those 30 days, my phone turned into a haunted object. First it was texts from Mom. We heard you're selling. Please, Carter. Chloe's car is going to be repossessed. All we ask is $50K. That's nothing to you now. Please. Then Chloe, direct as ever. You're a monster. You stole Grandpa's gift, and now you're running away with it. I hope you choke on the money. I didn't respond. I blocked them. All of them. Mom, Dad, Chloe, the cousins, the aunts. One by one, like I was turning off the lights in a house I no longer lived in. And the silence that followed? It was the first peace I'd had in 3 years. On the final day, I did one last walk through. The house was empty. Cleaner than it had ever been when I lived in it, almost sterile. My boots echoed against the white oak floors as I moved through each room, slower than I expected. It felt like saying goodbye to a friend you'd gone to war with. I ran my hand along the wainscoting in the front hallway. I remembered sanding it 3 separate times after I misjudged the paint sheen. I remembered the exact YouTube video I watched on plaster repair after a pipe burst during the second winter and destroyed the dining room ceiling. In the primary bedroom, I stood in the corner where I'd cried, alone, in the dark. I didn't have the money to fix the leaking roof, and water had ruined the drywall I'd just spent 2 weekends putting up. That was the same week Chloe posted a video of her drinking wine in Santorini. I remember thinking, she's on a boat. I'm living in a bucket. But now, the room was pristine. The walls were painted the exact warm gray I'd agonized over. Sunlight poured in through the huge windows I installed myself, and for a moment, I stood there like a stranger in my own creation. I went back downstairs, placed the keys gently on the kitchen island, and walked out the front door without looking back. I didn't just sell the house. I left the state. No farewell dinner. No announcement. No dramatic social media post. I wired Marcus his final bonus for saving my ass, booked a one-way U-Haul, and drove east until the trees turned into open sky. I ended up in Wyoming. Don't ask me why. It wasn't on some vision board or anything. I was just following the silence. 40 acres of nothing but sagebrush, silence, and the jagged teeth of the Tetons in the distance. The nearest town is population 400, and the general store still uses a manual register. I bought a prefab steel barn to live in while I planned my next build. No drywall this time, just exposed beams, timber frame, and a stone fireplace so massive you could roast a hog in it. The air here? Thin and cold. Hurts your lungs if you breathe too deep. But at least it's clean. I still get updates through the grapevine. Chloe filed for bankruptcy. My parents had to refinance their house to help her, and now Dad can't retire until he's 76. They tell anyone who'll listen that I stole the family legacy. Let them talk. They weren't there when the roof caved in. They weren't there when I slept in a lawn chair next to a space heater. They weren't there when I ripped out the kitchen cabinets with my bare hands and got stitches across my palm from a rusted nail. But the house was never theirs. It was mine. Every board. Every blister. Every dollar I bled into it. And now? Now I've got the land. The tools. The silence. And the freedom to build something again, this time, with no one to take it from me. The first winter in Wyoming nearly broke me. Again. The difference was, this time I chose it. There's a kind of cold out here that doesn't play around. Not the wet, gray drizzle of Portland. This is bone-cracking, nose-bleeding, God-forgotten cold. It sneaks into your joints and whispers, "You sure you wanted this, city boy?" But I was ready. The steel barn I lived in, insulated, wired, with stove roaring, felt more like a spaceship than a home at first. No trim. No drywall. Just exposed beams and hanging lights I rigged from the rafters. It was crude, functional, and perfect. No family photos. No ghosts. Just tools, plans, and quiet. I built a cot in the corner, next to the wood stove, and every night I fell asleep to the sound of firewood crackling and wind hammering the walls like it was trying to get in. Every morning, I woke up, boiled coffee on the stove, and walked the perimeter of my land like a man guarding a kingdom no one else believed in. It was slow going. I cleared brush. Dug trenches for water and power lines. Staked out the foundation for what I decided would be my next project, a cabin. Not just any cabin. A timber frame masterpiece. Hand-joined beams. Stone fireplace. Metal roof that could hold 6 feet of snow without complaining. I was building it alone, just like before. Not because I didn't have options, but because I didn't want anyone else touching it. This wasn't about resale. There was no design magazine coming out here to take pictures. This was mine. No drywall to hide mistakes. No family to file lawsuits when the equity showed up. Every night, I ate like a man in the army again, beans, rice, jerky, maybe an apple if I was feeling festive. I'd sit on a folding chair, look at the mountains in the distance, and let my brain go quiet. The weirdest part? I wasn't lonely. You'd think isolation like that would eat at you. But after the noise of Portland, the guilt trips, the texts, the lawsuits, the locksmiths, I found solitude comforting. But peace has a way of drawing attention. It was a Tuesday when I saw the truck. White. Dusty. Pulled up to my front gate just as the sun was going down, painting the sky in violent purples and burnt orange. I stepped out of the barn, hammer still in hand, boots in the snow, and watched a man climb out in a dark jacket. Courier. He didn't say a word. Just held out an envelope with that same crooked logo I recognized from the law firm in Portland. Them. I took it. Looked him dead in the eye. "Thanks," I said. He nodded and walked back to his truck. I stood there for a minute, envelope in hand, heart weirdly calm. I already knew what it was. Some new attempt to claw back what they'd already lost. Maybe they found a new lawyer. Maybe Chloe found a new sob story. I didn't open it. I walked back to the burn barrel behind the barn, opened the lid, and dropped the envelope in with the rest of the scrap wood from that week. I lit a match. Watched it curl and blacken and disappear into ash. Then I went back inside, poured a cup of coffee, sat down by the fire, and stared out the window. Let them keep trying. Out here? There's no court of appeals. Spring came late in Wyoming. The kind of late that laughs in your face after a false thaw. One week it was sunny and 50, the next it dumped 2 feet of snow like winter was throwing one last tantrum. But the melt finally held, and by mid-May, the ground softened enough to break. I laid the foundation. Concrete footings, set deep and wide to handle the frost heave. I rented a small mixer, poured it myself, and every day I ended up looking like I'd wrestled a bag of flour and lost. There was no crew. No schedule. No blueprint but my own sketches. But it was mine. Every bolt, every board, every aching muscle. I framed the walls by hand. Lifted the first beam with a jack pulley and prayers. The cabin started to take shape slowly, rising like a middle finger to everything I left behind. Some nights I caught myself smiling while I worked, which was strange. For a long time, I didn't think I had smiles left in me that weren't just shields. But there it was, a flicker of actual peace, of presence, of this is what it's supposed to feel like. And then, out of nowhere, Chloe called. Block number. It rang twice before I reflexively answered, hands still full of sawdust. Hello? Silence. Then, it's me. I didn't say anything. I wanted you to know I'm getting help, she said. Her voice was different, smaller, like she was walking barefoot on broken glass. I'm in a debt program. I'm working at a bakery. I know it's not what you want to hear, but I'm trying. I still didn't say anything. I think about Grandpa a lot, she added. About how I laughed at the house. I was a brat. You made something beautiful, and I tried to take it from you. I know I can't fix it, but I'm sorry. That part actually landed. Not because I needed the apology, but because she needed to give it. I'm not calling for money, she said. I know that ship sailed. I just wanted you to hear me say it. That's all. I exhaled. Okay, I said quietly. Then I hung up. I didn't block her again. I didn't delete the number. I just stood there, phone still in hand, and let the moment pass through me like weather. People always say family's forever. Like it's a virtue. Like it means something. But the truth is, blood doesn't make you safe. Effort does. Respect does. Work does. I watched that house rot while they laughed. I rebuilt it while they turned their backs. I defended it while they tried to steal it. And now, I was building something again. Not to prove anything. Not to win. But because creation is the opposite of destruction. And out here, I chose creation. I got back to work. By the end of June, the frame was done. The roof went up in July. August was insulation, windows, and siding. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't expensive. But it was strong. Honest. No drywall to hide the cracks. The cabin stood finished, quiet under the first snow. I lit the fire, brewed coffee, and stood at the window as the sun rose over the Tetons. No drama. No threats. Just silence. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Not lucky. Not victorious. Just home. On land no one could steal. Winter settled in hard. Snow piled up past the windows, and I cut firewood daily just to stay ahead. The work was constant, but I liked it. Out here, effort mattered. No one cared who your parents were or how messy your past had been. You shovel, you stay warm. You don't, you freeze. I started sketching again, nothing big, just ideas. Maybe a greenhouse in spring. Maybe a second cabin someday, a workshop. My hands, once calloused from salvage work in Portland, had new blisters from splitting logs. Different pain. Better pain. I still thought about the house sometimes, not with anger, but with distance. Like a man remembering a ship he once built that sank and somehow taught him to swim. One night, I pulled out the old binder, receipts, photos, notes. I flipped through it slowly, page by page, then tossed it into the fire without a word. The past doesn't get to live here. Just me. And whatever I build next. Spring came quietly. The snow melted, the ground softened, and the silence remained, steady, honest. I stood on the porch of the cabin I built with my own hands, watching a hawk drift over the ridge. No court notices. No knocks at the door. Just wind, wood smoke, and space to breathe. I didn't win. I walked away. That was enough.